Hi, and welcome to Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Collaborators, home to NARC troopers. If you would like to hear other podcasts, read articles, and find other resources, join me on my website, and it's narctroopers.com. Today, I'm very excited to have a guest with me today, Myla Morningstar Kinikini. She is a writer on Quora and does just a beautiful job of having honest, authentic conversations about what it is to be in a relationship with a person with narcissistic personality disorder. I can't get my page here where I have the list. So Myla, I'm going to let you tell us about your 3 Quora spaces where we can connect with you.
Sure. So yeah, I have 3 spaces on Quora that I'm actively involved in right now that I've created. The first one was the Narcissist Wife. That was the first one that I launched, and that one's it's a very personal site. A lot of personal experiences on that one. And then the next one that I created was Hidden Covert Narcissistic Abuse and Recovery, and that one focuses just on the phenomenon of covert narcissistic abuse, so that when you can go many years without knowing that they really have this. And then the other one that I recently just started is called the Art of Narcissism, which it's not how to be a better narcissist or anything. It is about processing your feelings through poetry or drawing or digital art and things like that. So I'm trying to get that one going, and so if anyone wants to stop in and check that out, they'd be more than welcome to.
I follow you on Quora, and I have my favorite writers there. Sophia Bell, Robert Torbe.
Yes, he's
yeah, there's some excellent writers who really speak quite candidly about the subject, and I always learn so much. I know that there's a lot of fans who say Quora saved their life, and that when they stumbled upon that and started reading about what is narcissism, it was just transformational, and it was like a lifeline being thrown to them. There's so much misunderstanding about what is a narcissist, and isn't everybody a narcissist? And
yes, I hear that.
and with the disengagement from the narcissist, there's so much misunderstanding, like, oh, it's just a breakup, it's just a divorce. We all have those. Just get over it. And that's not at all. It's just it's so terrible to be victimized twice, once by the narcissist and again by the community you're in, friends and family, because they just don't know. And so I know you and I are both committed to educating people about what this is, and all of that. So if it's okay, let's just go ahead and jump in and kind of talk about a little bit about those cycles of narcissistic abuse. And let me also add one other thing. Abuse does not necessarily entail physical abuse.
Mine did.
Emotional, ambient abuse can be equally as devastating. The covert narcissist is really good at that ambient abuse, and most of the time you don't even realize it is abuse until you're out of it and reflecting back on it later, and then you realize, oh my gosh, that is what that was, and wow, how did I not know that? But in these abuse cycles, there's the 3 stages: the love bombing, the devaluation, and the discard. So let's just talk about that a little bit, how that has, what your observations are on those stages, and kind of how that, how people can recognize that, what stage they're in, and what to do about it, and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, just to say something on what you just said, I've had people tell me, well, why don't you just talk to him? And it just makes me laugh, because any of us who've been through it, of course, understand that is what we've tried to do the whole time, and of course it doesn't work. It's not successful. So yeah, I mean, I guess I should start a little bit with so I've been married to I was married to a covert narcissist for 33 years. I met him when I was 17, and just like a little bit of the background on that. So the love bombing for me, he really did become who he thought I wanted him to be, and I can clearly see that now. As you know, as a person, he was deferential. He almost acted subservient at times. So I look back on that, and you know, I was so young, and I really didn't have a lot to compare it to. And to me, that was just the water that I swam in, kind of thing. You know, it didn't seem, and I've been doing that. I mean, even now, I will look back on things, and I'm like, oh my God, that really was abusive. And you know, it's just that when you're in it, it's the water that you're in, you don't always recognize it for what it is. That's just the way marriage works, or that's just the way things happen. The fact that we never really, I mean, we had these periods of time where we had conflict, but in our daily life, we never fought because he never told me anything that he wanted or to change, you know, nothing. And I now see that as a red flag as well, that you should have, you know, normal, healthy conflict. If not, then the person that you're with is suppressing their ego somehow to allow yours to move forward. Robert Torbay, you mentioned him. He actually says this really cool thing that I just read. You know, he says that you know, that idea that they would do favors for us all the time, that anyone with a healthy ego, a healthy sense of self, would understand that those kinds of things are not really deserved, and then they would kind of want equal, you know, they would want reciprocation. They would want to reciprocate. You know, my sense of self was weak because I was so young when I met him.
Mhm.
And so, you know, he was always running around doing things, you know, that for me that I didn't ask for. And I actually came up with five F's, I call them, of narcissism that I like to explain, like some of the stages that I passed through. And the first one was fast. So number one is fast. There is a lightning fast connection with these coverts,
Yeah.
especially. They're very cerebral. They try to connect, you know, mentally. And that is what he did with me. It was, we would have these, you know, hours long talks. But, you know, now I don't even know if, if much of the stuff that we talked about was even something that he was interested in. I think that all our lives.
Not. You know, I think they have an incredible gift that just comes with this illness. It is an illness, and
Yeah.
that
Natural
enables
mimics.
them to like tap into people and just mirror them and reflect them.
Yes.
So you're really kind of like talking to yourself.
You really are, and it makes it
They're not
narcissism
there.
in a double way, right?
Exactly. You are your own ultimate love relationship. I mean, they become everything you ever dreamed of and ever wanted, and all your secret desires, and they complete you, and it's just this over the top, magical, fantastical. Woo, you know,
and that is my second one, is fantasy, because that is what they do.
All right.
First one is fast. There's a lightning fast connection, and they'll move to like the love stage very quickly. I mean, basically, you know, my ex, when I got with him, he latched onto me and just never left. I mean, it kind of, I guess looking back, it might look kind of creepy, but I don't know. It just was normal to me. But you know, he did get me from a rebound relationship, and they do that often. They will approach when you're weak, when you're on the rebound from another relationship. That's when they kind of like to. I like to say that narcissists inhabit endings, and I think that that is true. They inhabit them in more ways than one. Not just the ending that they bring to you, but then they inhabit other people's endings, the endings of their relationship or some traumatic thing in their life, and they're there to pick up the pieces, right? And they're the shoulder to cry on. They're the ones that are going to be different, and that is almost never the case, that they're going to be different. So the next one would be fantasy, and that was really kind of, you know, and it's so hard to explain because, you know, I didn't have any fantasy life. I didn't. It's hard to explain to people why that fantasy means anything to me. I wasn't rich. We weren't rich. We didn't have much. It is the way that they make you feel, right? They make you feel like the two of you are special, like you're in your own world, like everyone else is an outsider, like all the two of you need is that, or the two of you. And then, you know, but you're better than everyone else. You're, smarter, you're more beautiful, you're whatever. And really that you don't need outsiders at all. So that fantasy is a fantasy of perfect love is what it is. So not so much a fantasy life, but the ideal of perfect love. And that is what they try to give you. And for a long time, he did give me that. I mean, I could never in 1,000 years have predicted what would have happened the way it did. I would have bet my life that I knew him, and I didn't. And that's the really heinous part of it, that you think you know someone after all of those years.
It feels very organic, doesn't it?
It does.
It feels
it does.
You've known them for lifetimes. Like
Yes.
they're just such a perfect fit,
Yes.
and that there's such intimacy. And the irony is that it's the opposite of intimacy.
It is. It was all created, and people don't get it.
Yeah, and it is a complete. What is a nice way to say it? Cluster. What of the mind?
Yes, cluster F. Yes.
It's unbelievable to look back at that and to realize what it was. It's just almost like how it blows your mind.
It does, and it makes me ill. I still get nauseous sometimes thinking about it, because it's like when it's your reality, right? Your whole reality is undermined by these people.
And let me just add this. This is not just your experience or my experience. Like, what a coincidence that you and I see the same way. There's like a textbook manual that almost every person with narcissistic personality disorder goes by that manual, by that rule book. They have the same behaviors, the same
it's a playbook, right?
Same everything. Just like any mental illness, it's going to have, like a schizophrenic would have maybe auditory or visual hallucinations. Same concept. This illness, this narcissistic disorder manifests in that way. So
yes,
it does make sense if you think about it. It's a manifestation of the illness, of the brain dysregulation, chemical, physical, anatomically, the whole thing all together. So yeah, it's not just us, it's everybody.
We don't know exactly how, why it occurs. They have some guesses, but they don't know for sure.
Right.
But we do know that, when it usually starts to happen probably between the ages of 3 and 6 years old. And then the NPD is in place by early adolescence. Yeah. And it's really a shame avoidance disorder. They have had something, whatever it is, they refuse to participate in shame at all. They won't be shamed. It's like battery acid to them. It's like if you threw it on them and they have to run from it. And so whatever they do, so the reason that these things are so consistent is that there's only a certain array of human behaviors you can choose from, right? Given any path that you're on. And if you're trying to avoid shame at every turn, you can pretty much predict what they're going to do. You're going to take the direction, they're going to take the direction that's going to be the least amount of shame or the most amount. And so you can also see that in a positive vein, which is like, say, the most amount of attention. Or the other way that they can avoid shame is by placing it on you. So if they're placing it on you, then that's a way to get the shame off of them. And so they'll do that. So one of those maneuvers is what they're going to take in any given situation. And so it's no wonder really that they are all very consistent in that playbook.
Exactly. So back to the 5 F's. We've got fast, we've got fantasy, and oh, what a glorious fantasy.
Yes, it is. It's a fantasy of perfect love, right? Perfect. It's going to be perfect and eternal, and that
everything we ever wanted.
And you do feel that, and it's so hard to transmit that thing, right? But I mean, I try to do it. I tried to write about it, but it's hard. Just imagine that, that you're just I used to describe it as myself. I was in a bubble, like a bubble that even before I knew what MPD was or anything, I would say that. Like I was in a bubble that like he sort of created around me. Yeah. And the world just didn't hit me as hard,
A magical insulated bubble. Who cares if there's a pandemic or war or famine or inflation? I'm in this bubble and I could die right now and be blissfully
At
glorious.
least I have this, right?
Oh,
Right.
it's just like everything is always just perfectly.
Yeah, I wrote it one Quora thing that I wrote said, it's the equivalent of the temperature always being perfect, 78 degrees outside,
Yes,
and you're on an island somewhere. It's like fantasy island. It's just
it
your
is
island.
Fantasy Island. That is really
It's your island.
exactly
It's this
what it
idea
is.
that if you could find that soulmate and you could walk through life with them in some sort of, Disney, spotlight coming down, that is how it feels.
It
And
does.
it doesn't look that way necessarily to the outside from the outside into people, but nothing touched me. I mean, I was just kind of disconnected from
Mhm.
all of that. And, I realize now that he isolated me too, but that was kind of secondary to, you know, that was just what I'd always felt. And it was just
I've heard
normal.
people say that that shared fantasy stage is actually, I believe Sam Vaknin was the first person who said this, that the shared fantasy is actually a mutual psychosis.
It is. It is.
A
And that
mutual,
is one of the things I'm going to talk about, that we, because I also have eight ways to recover from narcissism. They're all R's. So we'll do F's and R's today.
hey, okay.
Um,
So
I
what's
love
number
I love
three?
automatopoeia. So
What's
all right.
F
So the
number
third one is favors. So one of the big things to watch for whenever you're, if you're looking out for narcissism or possible narcissistic abuse, the possibility of it is especially a covert narcissist. They're the opposite of grandiose. I mean, they still want the same thing. They want supply, but they go about getting it in a different way. And the way that they do it, they're smart. I mean, they're super smart. They figured out that if you're blunt about it, if you hit people over the head with it, like a grandiose might, people might shy away from that, So they are sneaky about it. And what they end up doing is they put out this idea out there that, they're very humble. They can be great neighbors. I mean, my ex-husband was like, he was the first one out there, shoveling snow on a Saturday for a neighbor. He was very much into appearances, how everything was perceived, right? And everybody, if you were to meet him right now, and I mean, I'm serious, you would probably think I was making the whole thing up, because
right?
he would come
Very
across as totally
charismatic.
authentic, the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. You
Mhm.
wouldn't spot a single thing in him that would be unusual about like that.
And
He's
probably
smooth.
very soft-spoken and sweet and
Yes.
polite
Yes.
and courteous.
Yes.
Mine was always just so, I mean, he never raised his voice. And I
Yeah.
have always been amazed at how you can actually just annihilate someone, just totally destroy them without ever laying a hand on them or ever raising your voice.
Yeah.
He taught me that
Yeah.
that
Well,
is
with my ex, he did eventually raise his voice, but for 25 years he didn't really, and never talked to me like he did in the last
right,
4 years when
right.
the devaluation really started.
Mhm.
But the way that our relationship started out was really about, him doing a lot of things. He would just do them unasked. I didn't ask him to do them, but he would do them all the time. It was just a kind of thing. Kind of a fetch and carry kind of thing, like, let me get you this, let me get you that, let me serve you, let me be your humble servant. And then it kind of, moved out to other things, but he was always the first one, to volunteer to go to the store, to do those little things, that you don't always want to do.
And other
And
people see them as that, as just
yeah,
this, wow, she's so lucky, and wow,
yes.
what a catch. And he's
Oh
just
God, yeah.
Mhm.
That's called virtue signaling too. And the narcissist is signaling to other people that, look how great I am, look how lucky she is. Or sometimes signaling to new partners that they might be looking at.
Well, he's also, or she, he or
Yes.
she is also getting fuel or supply from
Mhm.
that admiration of look at
Yeah.
how awesome,
Well,
that
and then anything
person
that they
is.
later spend, because we'll talk about that a little bit more, any kind of devaluation that they do to what we call flying monkeys, which are just people that don't know who they really are. Everyone really who buys their act because they don't know who they are. So it's, and these are people too that don't think too deeply about it. They're not going to. They just kind
Well,
of take
they have them fooled But then again, they had us fooled too. So
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I don't fault people for, for
right,
believing.
right. Uh-huh.
There are probably many people out there that I don't know right now that are covert narcissists that if I heard it from their spouse or their partner, I might believe it now, but I wouldn't have believed it then.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's important to believe victims. It really is. But
So we
the
have fast and fantasy, and
fantasy
number
and
three,
favors.
favors.
Mhm.
The favors
And then
meaning
the fourth one is this
behavior.
is moving more into devaluation stage. It's I call it finicky. So
Finicky is number 4.
he is number 4. So
Love it. Love it.
as they move into devaluation mode, what they start to do is well, first of all, it's everything's got to comport with what's best. I mean, you've got to, the environment has to suit them. But really, with what it started out with me was, I mean, it was like a switch was flipped, really. So one day he was the fantasy love person guy. And then the next day, basically, he left for 2 weeks. And then basically he came back and he was this other person, this imposter, this alien, whatever. And, it was everything I said, my tone was wrong. The word was wrong.
Mhm.
He took offense to everything. And
Just pick.
pick. And it was just like everything. He was so finicky about, like, I couldn't even open my mouth. And finally, by the end, it became, the act of speaking itself was the problem. And we would go into this whole word salad thing and at first, I mean, I would get so confused. The confusion was profound. I like to say there's 5 signs of covert narcissism: confusion. Like it's like the confusion, the cognitive dissonance is so massive because that somewhere in there you were making a point. There was a point, and yet they're spinning around on this little tiny micro point thing, and they have you retreating. They have you, oh my God, yeah, you right. I did do something in 1982. I don't know. I like
Exactly.
And they have you in that position, and then that the bigger point has gone. That you're losing this battle. You just don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
And that the bigger picture, like, this should be so easy, right? It should be to just sit down with another human being and talk about it, right? That should be simple.
That's impossible to do that. But for me, for example, we were planning a move. Bad things had happened. Of course they had. And I had minimized them and stood by him, defending him, excusing him, rationalizing it all. Just all the things I should not have done. Any neurotypical person would have just exited the building and said, wow, that is messed up.
But you're trauma bonded.
No, and they would be gone, but no, I stayed. And, the effort to talk to him was an effort to, find jobs, and we were going to buy another house in the new location. And I was excited about it, like, new start. Oh, we're going to be in a new place, and we're not going to be reminded of all the terribly horrible, messed up stuff you've done here. And we're going to go there, and then it'll be cleaner and better. So let's plan this. And, he would cooperate to a large degree and be on board, like, yeah, and we would go visit, and we got a realtor, and it looked like everything was as it should be, but there was always that undercurrent of criticism and picking. And at one point he said, why do you always burst my bubble? He said, it's like you've just got this pin and you're always just poking at my bubble.
That's what he's doing.
And I was like, oh my gosh, that's projection and transference, right? And I thought, I am trying to help us build this new, better, improved 2.0 version of our lives. Be excited with me and work with me. Don't attack me and tell me that I'm being overly critical. If I'm saying something that you're interpreting as poking your bubble, I'm sorry, that is not my intention. It is to
but attention gets lost, right?
Some realistic plan and a realistic expectation of what's going to happen here. Let's just navigate this together. He couldn't have that conversation because in his mind, all he could see was contempt for me because I wasn't giving him what he needed with the fuel and supply. And there had been so much ugliness and water under the bridge. I wasn't shiny and sparkly anymore. And there were all these other people, girls that, I mean, he was a cutie patootie. He was younger than me. And he would go out and people would think, whoa, what a catch. And, oh, you're so awesome and you're so handsome and you're so smart.
Yep.
And we were way past that. We were together. We were married for 15 years. And you get past that of having to inflate their ego all the time and pet them and, oh, you're so amazing.
I mean, that you have to spend all your time doing that, right?
Yeah, you have other things that should be common vision kind of things that you're doing together.
Well, we raised 3 children together.
But that doesn't happen. So finicky is perfect. I'm loving this.
Okay. And then number 5
Number
is
5.
No, you burnt. Goodbye. My ex, when he started down that road, and this could be called the long goodbye too, because
yes,
it doesn't. Yes, sometimes they will just suddenly discard you, but and mine would hoover me back over and over. I just didn't know it was called hoovering then.
Right.
I had no idea. He would micro hoover me, if that's even a word.
It is. I've read about
like
this.
He would do it several times a day. It was crazy. In my mind, in my emotional landscape, we had broken up. I mean, like that day 3 or 4 times, and then he would switch the whole emotional landscape on me and be like, toward the end, it really the cycles got super fast. One of those indications, I think, that they're finally going to discard, or that you're going to have to, is that it just gets so much worse toward the end, or at least it did for me. And the cycles got really close together. Like he would basically show contempt for me, devalue me, push me away, say he was leaving, and then in the same 30-minute span be all over me, trying to like kiss my neck.
Exactly. They just turn on a dime.
Mm-hmm.
And you never know what is happening. This isn't even
you're just like I've spent so much time in confusion because of that, just cognitive dissonance. I would have a brain fog all the time. And then the whole overall thing, I would try to ask, like, why are you doing this? It just seemed like it should be such a simple thing to sit down and figure it out, right? No, it's not. They will talk in circles. It's all circular logic. It's all around that. But the finish thing, I mean, it really is. They are moving toward a goal, whether they know it or not. I don't know how much of it is always conscious or not. But anyone who was normal would see what their actions were doing.
And didn't you intuitively have some gut feeling?
Oh yeah,
that he hated you.
Yes.
And then he's just like disgusted by you, and you just knew that if he could push you in front of a bus, he'd probably do it. But you kind of like dismissed it because of the cognitive dissonance, and just told yourself, that can't be right. I'm just imagining this. He's my husband.
And mine was even worse. I was really in denial after so many years, and I had been with him so long and was so young. And because it wasn't really that, it wasn't bad abuse, but there was physical abuse. And the last 4 years that we were together, and he would have these rages. Right. I mean, I don't know. I think that he did come from a really strong family. They were LDS, which is Mormons out here in Idaho and Utah. And I really do think that there was a part of him, that false self that he built up really was, did think that he was all these things. I
think they do, definitely. They're delusional. It is a delusional dissociative disorder.
It is.
They do not live in the same reality that you and I.
They don't. He really thought he was all those things, though. And one of the things that he tried to do in a way, and I don't know that anyone's ever really said this, so I'll say it, is I do think in a way he tried to live up to that false self in a way.
I agree with you. Absolutely. Yes.
And it made him so angry, right? That he would rage after, like, because he would stick around and stay. So, I think those levels of empathy go up and down depending on the person.
Let's talk about empathy real quick, and I'm gonna transition over to I've got to do a technical thing in a second. So give me 2 secs. 1, 2, and okay, we're back. as far as that empathy thing goes, I just want to point out, I have read a lot of research about what types of empathy a person with narcissism, the malignant
Yeah,
pathological.
they don't, and they lack effective empathy, isn't it called?
Yes.
And
Well, there's cognitive and then
they have that.
emotional. And so they have cognitive empathy, meaning they can recognize
Yes.
what another person is feeling because they play off of it.
Yes.
They use it. And it's the emotional empathy that they can't
Right.
muster.
Yeah.
And it's
people
because of
sometimes think,
actual, yeah, it's actual brain
Mhm.
disorder, brain abnormalities that cause that to happen, you know. A lot of studies, you can read all about the amygdala and the prefrontal
Yep.
cortex and the hippocampus and the limbic system and interior ancilla, all of these areas. It's not like they're choosing it. It's just that they don't get it.
Right.
There's a, it's,
And it's hard to understand that because the way that that disorder manifests toward us is so bad that it is very tempting to use the word evil. And I have used it. I'm going to be honest about that. I use it for to really transmit, I think, how bad it is. I don't really truly believe it's some sort of
well,
demonic evil or anything.
people use
I
it all
know
the
that
time.
it's something that's just not, it's not in their control. I sat there with my ex, and I would, this is the man that I married all those years, that I had 3 children with. I'm trying to get through to him, right? Talk to him. And the love, oh my God, the frustration and just the absolute, and it really, I'll call it despair that I felt when I saw that I was not going to get through to him. I was not going to break through that wall. It was not going to happen. And it was like lose, I lost my best friend. I lost, my kid's father. I lost all of that. And we couldn't really even stay friends because he's crazy. So,
Well,
I
yeah,
mean, I can't be around him because he would hoover me all the time. And that's
I just want to say we use that word evil to describe a lot of people who are mentally ill.
yeah.
Take
But I think this
people
one,
who are schizophrenic, for example, and who have like there's different, that's sort of on a spectrum too. And there's
right.
people who have schizophrenia who would never do anything to harm anyone, but then there's the other end of that spectrum, other types of it where they hear voices. They think that
They do.
their children are all demons that are talking to them from hell, and so they silence them. And then everyone says, wow, that person's truly the epitome of evil. Well, can you be evil if you don't know what you're doing? If you're too mentally ill to even see reality?
Right.
If you're in
Well, the
such
thing
a
about
state of delusion, do you have free will?
right. Well,
What
I mean, the
that
thing about
argument
empathy
people?
is we really don't know. We don't know exactly what causes it. I know some people say that there's, it's a brain damage or something. I don't think we really know yet. I don't think there's been enough
Yeah.
research. Don't. And we don't know, if it was a mental illness, they might be able to treat it or something. But apparently a personality disorder, I just wrote a thing on this. I mean, it is a lot. It's so many things, right, that go into who we are as a person, our personhood, right? Our sense of self. So when a baby is born, they're pure ego. That's what they are. They're born with pure ego. I want what I want when I want it. And they make no apologies for that. We don't make them make apologies. And then as we grow a little bit, we get older, right? The id, which is what Freud described, starts to overlayer onto the ego. And that's that civilized, rational mind. And it starts to form. And this is where your caregivers come in, and they're showing you, what you need to do to be a fully realized human sentient adult, somewhere along the line between that ego being there and the id being overlaid on it. Something interrupts that process. We don't know what. And it's not like you're going to choose that when you're 5 years old, but it could be trauma, could be something else. I believe I know where it came from with my ex. I believe it was I believe it was abuse. I believe he was abused. I know he was abused when he was a child. And but they don't, that doesn't develop properly. And it almost splits off. You talked about it as being a kind of disassociative thing. It's almost like they have two personalities in there, two people.
Yes.
And so when they decide that they're not going to deal with anything bad anymore, they're just not going to deal with anything bad, shame, anything like that. They kind of split. Their psyche kind of seems to split, and that real person that they were just kind of gets shoved way down, and then that they start to build up this false person. And that fantasy self, and that's another way that fantasy comes in, not just the love fantasy, but the fantasy that they have about themselves. You have to buy into their fantasy, or they will get very angry. And it's the way that you start out, really, the way that devaluation starts and begins is they do something. Okay, they're just doing what they do. You know, they do something. They don't really have much of a conscience, so they just do it. And you see it. You just see it, and you say, "Oh, wait, that's not cool. What did you do that for?" And you are now calling them on their fantasy self. You're saying, "Wait a minute, you're not perfect. Wait a minute, you're not the faithful guy. You're not the perfect guy." And when they see this, they kind of turn to you and go, "Unacceptable." So there's this cycle that then goes back and forth between you. You see what they do. They negate that because you're trying to threaten. You're really threatening them. You're threatening their fantasy self, and that's why they feel threatened. Because you are. You're trying to knock down their fantasy.
Yes.
And they say, unacceptable. You come back and you see, well, wait, you're doing this other thing, and this is terrible. And they're like, no, denied, unacceptable. And that starts to trigger. There is a real side. There's a real purpose to the devaluation period. That purpose is and not a purpose like we would think of a master plan, but the purpose and the way that it happens is they really do go from seeing you as perfect or idealized to seeing you as awful and terrible. And it's these attacks on their false self that they believe that they're feeling, because they kind of are. The more you see, the more you're going, wait, this doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Yeah, they feel like you have betrayed them.
Yeah.
Because you see what you see reality, you're
Yeah.
trying to get them to see that.
Yes.
And they can't. So I want to looking back at these 5 F's, I think we have to say that the narcissist, while they're going through this, these 5 steps, there never does it cross their mind that there is anything wrong with them, or that in their reality that they live in, they are the victim, if anything. They are the one that has been betrayed. They are the one that has been disappointed by your terribleness, and they have just a huge amount of resentment towards you, contempt and resentment.
Yeah, contempt.
You have been so horrible to them. And I want to talk about another feature that goes with that is their amnesiac kind of
they will wipe you off the face of the earth in their mind.
They do not have continuous memories either. Not only, and this is the thing that just is unbelievable to me, that a person could do this, even if they have some kind of disorder or mental illness.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I still can't understand. I mean, I couldn't do that. You couldn't do that. Any normal person, they live with their memories. And they have continuous memory. That's the psychological term for it, continuous memory. So they can reflect on their past, learn from it, make adjustments, whatever. And they remember people. And when you remember, when you connected with a person and you've been intimate with them, you remembered them with some degree of mercy, fondness, respect.
They don't remember those emotions.
They don't remember they ever felt anything positive.
No, because they didn't, though. That's why they don't remember that part.
Correct. They never really connected in the first place. And so not only did they just hit the button and erase you as if you never existed or anything.
They will do that.
the gaps that they have in their memory are filled with confabulations, fantasy, fabrications, and then they believe it. So
Yes.
people that vilify the narcissist, and now granted, I know what destruction that they do. I made it for, I'm not a young person, I made it for a very long time, had some very terrible breakups and all of that, but nothing compared to this.
Yes.
You know,
yeah, it's really bad. And my ex, yeah, my ex had no sense of linear time either. Like it was so if we were talking about something, he was literally hopping around in time, like something happened before another thing, and that was the thing that happened later was the cause, and the thing that happened earlier was the effect. And I'm like, see, he just took whatever he needed for the fantasy to keep,
exactly. They fill in blank, and they call it revisionist history, where they just make up a history. So who knows the narrative that he's spinning with his new friends, who of course, my replacements, I'm sure there have been many in 3 years, my replacements and his friends, his groupies, his harem, his flying squirrels, his flying monkeys, his flying fantasies, all of that stuff, they believe this narrative. And probably, I read somewhere, maybe 10 or 20% of it is truth. That they only remember. I don't know what study was done. I wish I could tell you where it was done and who did it, but I know that I read they did a study with over 3,000 people that have been diagnosed with pathological malignant narcissism. And that's hard to find because most people don't go to therapy.
They don't go in. They don't go.
Or they go and they bamboozle their therapist, and
they do that. Yes, they do that.
Doesn't even know what they are, because they have such a bulletproof false persona. They can convince anybody. Anybody, even
they convinced us, like you said. I went until about 2 years ago. So the way that I actually found out about, I have a college degree. I took a psychology class. I barely remember the word narcissism.
Same here.
But yeah, so anyway, I had a friend. She actually is staying with me this week. It's kind of odd, but she's much younger than me, but very courageous friend, because many people would not have done what she did. She actually had gotten really close to me, and she was here. She had lived with in a camper that I had, a trailer that I had for a while, and she got to see a little bit of what was actually happening. And in the wake of that, she and her boyfriend at the time, they actually invited me to a Denny's. They took me in their car, and we didn't get out of the parking lot. They sat and talked to me, and she told me, and Tony told me, so their names were Casey and Tony, and he had been through a lot of therapy, and so he had some understanding of some things, and she had also, had some things. Anyway, that was the first time that the idea, I think the word narcissist was brought up to me. And they said, well, it could be a narcissist, could be a sociopath, could be, and I mean, I listened, I heard them, but I thought, well, that's not possible. I mean, nobody can hide for that long. Nobody could fool me. That's just not possible, right? That wouldn't be a thing. And so I just tried not to judge, and I took what they said and I just went on with it. But what that did do is it started me poking around, looking for answers. And I stumble on Quora, and all of a sudden I see this whole hidden world. And it was over a period of time that I really was, before I actually said, okay, these are the things that he's doing. Now, what does that fit? Because I just went purely by that. What is he doing to me that makes no sense?
And once you get started with the research on this, it's amazing how much stuff there is out there about it, not just on Quora, but you've got like Melanie Tanya Evans and Kim Saeed, and my guru, number one person who's taught me the most is Sam Vaknin, but also Richard Grannon and Robert Torbay. And the list is, there's so much. There's so much crap.
I don't know how people would have ever, people from other generations who did not have the internet, I don't know. I guess they just lived in hell until they
Well,
didn't.
maybe that's why there wasn't such a focus on it like these
Yeah.
days. I don't like it the way that there's so much trendiness, pop
Yeah, that's
culture.
not good.
Everybody's a narcissist. Well, no, they're not.
Thanks to
But it
Donald
is increasing. I guarantee you, look at our leaders, look at the people in charge of things that are making decisions in the world. I won't name names because I don't want to
Yes.
alienate political
Yeah,
people.
right. We're not political here.
We're all in this mess
We're just victims.
and
We're just victims.
one party is not doing a better job than the other. They are all corrupt and failing us at this time.
Right.
So,
Right.
but just look around the world at the people that are in charge. You don't think that there's something wrong with them?
All right.
I'm pretty
there
sure
have been a lot of
just there are more of them and there's more awareness of it. So I hope that narcissism evolves kind of like ADHD evolves. 20 years ago, I'm a teacher and I had students that, before they had that label and diagnosed them with ADHD, before that was in the DSM, the manual for different things, but it's like nobody talked about it.
Right.
It wasn't common verbiage for people to say that, a parent or a teacher. And we would just say, think to these kids, why don't you just sit down and stop wiggling around? Just
right,
sit.
right.
Not knowing that there was anything wrong with them, except, gosh, maybe they eat too much sugar. But now we know more. We have a deeper understanding of what it is. We know that they're probably overly medicated these days, but we also understand the things that, how to treat it and what to do with that situation, and that it is a condition and it's
You're right.
I'm hoping that narcissism gets to that place where people understand it and acknowledge it, and they don't just throw the term around carelessly like everybody's a narcissist, you're a narcissist, he's a narcissist.
And I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah,
I do
don't
think
either. It takes away.
I think there's a kind of ground roots thing though that's happening on Quora and on the internet. And there's a lot of people out there who are using the word irresponsibly. Like, my boyfriend broke up with me. Is he a narcissist? Like, come on. Yeah. Like, we're not talking about that. We're talking about some serious gut-wrenching, gut level abuse. And only someone who has at least 30 minutes to sit down while I explain any of it to them is going to really understand anything about it, what the true NPD thing is. So, but I think that Quora and other places like it, I think they serve a function in that there is very little in the DSM. I mean, as far as what's actually there, right, about narcissism. And you're
they're changing it all the time.
But there's not all of this vast amount of detail that we have. This is people who go out and they have observed it. They've either come through relationships themselves, and so they're saying what they lived, their lived experience. And there's actually very few really, people in the professional field that we're focusing on, at least at one time. It's a lot of people who lived it,
Right? It's hard to find anyone, a mental health professional, who really understands what it is.
Well, I sought out counseling. My husband did go a couple of times. And that was just so much fun. That was such a disaster because I didn't realize it at the time. But we went and saw this woman. It was still COVID, and it was we did it telehealth, and so we saw her together once, and then he saw her by himself once, and then I saw her by myself once. So we saw her together. She seemed perfectly nice and fine. He saw her. And by the time she got to me, she had completely turned against me. I still have the letter that I wrote to her that she completely mistook for anything rational that I ever said. I mean, it was crazy. And I knew then, this is before I knew what narcissism was even. But I just, what the heck is going on here?
What just happened, right?
So later on, there was another counselor, and I hate to admit that I did this, but he had a session like that, and it was a telehealth, and I slipped my phone in and taped it. And, it wasn't even that he was telling her anything bad. It was just that there's no problem. And he's being the nice guy, right? Asking about her, being nice, so he's not even saying anything bad about me. It was just, I don't have a
It's all
problem.
part of the
And-
manipulation, though.
Mhm.
My ex came to me and used the things his therapist that he got her to believe as ammunition against me, to give
Mhm.
himself permission to do the
Yes.
things he did. In the end, in the very end, when he suddenly just out of the blue decided it's time to go, I'm going to leave
Mhm.
now. And he acted like, well, what's the problem? Do what I'm going to do. Be single, start dating, have fun.
Right.
And I was just like, we're getting ready to move. And, a week ago we
They
were
do not live
at
in the
the
real
house.
world, do they? No, no.
Wait a
That
second.
and that idea, that final
What's
thing, that
happening
finish.
here? And
Yeah.
he said, yeah, my therapist said she thinks maybe I'm polyamorous and I should just go with that. I
Oh
was
yeah.
like,
They should all join a club for sure.
oh
That's
my God,
all of them
this
have
is
that
like,
idea.
what
Um,
on earth are you
I
talking
could tell
about?
you some stories, but I won't
Because
right
like,
now. But
it was like last week. I mean, we had just gotten back from a trip to Europe and then not a word about anything
nope.
being wrong or leaving or being unhappy or whatever. We were eating crepes and holding hands through the streets of Paris. And then boom, he's gone and I'm polyamorous. My therapist said so. It's like, wow, and he's not. And that wasn't, I mean, it was just what he told her and made her believe. So
Well, that idea of that final thing, the finish. So as you reminded me, we have fast, fantasy, favors, finicky, and then finished. And that is the thing. Like there were so many dress rehearsals for me. For he would leave every other day, or claim or say he was going to leave. Sometimes many times a day. It started to feel unreal, and the threat became, not real. And it just sort of, after a while, you just don't believe it. And yet, so your supply is diminished too, because they're not getting the reaction from you that they once were.
right.
And so they have to keep upping the ante to get it.
Mhm.
But it is true that, like, especially coverts, though, once you see through their fantasy self, once you see it, and Dr. Melissa Cult is someone that I follow on Quora.
I
She's
love
awesome. She says this, and I believe it's true. Once you see through their fantasy self, they will not stay ever. Now, some coverts will stay, they say, for a long time. And they do stay for a long time. They really do invest in a long-term source of supply. They don't like the effort that it takes to go out and find someone else. They want that person to be there to just, be able to unload crap on you, and partly to get affirmative affirmation, but when that's gone, then to just, kind of shit on your day or whatever. And they really invest in that long-term thing.
Yes.
But once you see past the false self, it's just a matter of time, and they will discard. And unlike a normal narcissist, or if there is such a thing, but a grandiose narcissist, unlike them, coverts will discard you for good. They don't necessarily hoover you back if you've seen past that false self.
Correct.
And
They're
you've
done.
really seen it. Like, there's so much shame or potential for shame involved with them, that they will often, it'll be final. It'll be for good. They'll never come.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah. And so
I
I say finish, that's what I mean with coverts, man. When they go, they're probably gone forever.
Let me toss one other thing out there to think about. They're beginning to think that all personality disorders are more interrelated than they thought previously.
Yeah.
And they're not like such separate diagnoses. They're also saying that maybe the covert, vulnerable, shy narcissist is really the only one that's truly a narcissist.
I know.
And that the overt, grandiose narcissist is really a primary psychopath.
That could very well be, because I really think that narcissism is a thing that is hidden in a way. I mean, it's not something that you approach straight on. I mean, I have felt this from the beginning, just intuitively, that
yes.
That people who go out and show that they're kind of like brag, the thing that you normally think of when you think of grandiose narcissists, you think of the word narcissist, you think kind of a braggart. I have a son who's like that, but he's 26, he probably is going to come out of that stage eventually. It is those things that you would see when you see a young person kind of, hey, I'm great, or young man, I'm great, I'm wonderful, yeah, look at me. And I think those things, if they stay past adolescence or early adulthood, those may be psychopathic traits. narcissists they hide, really. I mean, you'll never really know it. And, you
Definitely
know,
covert. And that's what they're saying. We're in the vanguard, in the front.
yeah, I
of
think we
people
are.
naming in this. Sam Vaknin, Richard Brannon, and us are the only people that
really?
I've heard say that the covert is really the only true narcissist,
Wow.
and that the overt, grandiose, is probably just a psychopath, because there is such an overlapping of lack of empathy, lack of remorse, no object constancy, projection, the shame, the all that.
The thing about psychopaths, though, I've always heard that they don't eat and kill their own mates, unlike narcissists. But I don't know. Like you said, the lines get kind of blurred.
They do. They can definitely.
Maybe they just try to keep up that public idea of
you're
the
thinking
wife
about like the psychopath that has people buried under the house, and the wife had no clue. But there's different kinds of psychopaths.
There are.
Different
Not everyone
kinds
is a serial killer.
of narcissists, and there's definitely the ones who harm their partner just as much as they harm, because that's just what
some people say narcissists don't. They don't physically abuse like hell. They don't.
The narcissist is wants to have, there are some differences we don't have time to get into, but I do think that you can have be both. I think hence the term narcopath. You've heard that narcopath is a narcissistic / sociopath, or a narcissistic / psychopath. And yes, you can be both. You can.
And I think that sociopath part is often from environment too. Like, the first word that was mentioned about my ex was sociopath. And I discounted that because I did not see him acting in those ways, but it could be because he came from a good family. He's not he had enough money. He didn't have, those conditions that are set for really making someone sociopathic. But if he had, I think that he could very well have gone down that road.
Yes. There's a lot of criminality,
There are. He's not that, but
it's preferred. It's kind of like Asperger's is not a politically correct term anymore. You don't say that people have that. They have autism. They're somewhere on the autism spectrum. And with sociopaths, they don't really say sociopaths anymore. It's antisocial personality disorder. And that explains it so perfectly, right? And you could have a narcissist with those antisocial personality traits. You can have a cerebral narcissist or a somatic that's covert. You could have,
somatic
all kinds of
more physical, right?
Exactly.
No, the cerebral, I'll throw out one crazy theory that I have. I could be breaking new psych ground here. I don't know. But I actually think there's another type called a failed narcissist. And I've met a couple of those. And the way that I like to put it is they want supply. They are covert narcissists. But they're terrible at it. They don't have the charm, or they don't have the ability to really get someone in. So what they do is they fall back almost completely on their flying monkeys, right? So they'll come in and they'll get someone and they'll victimize them, and then they'll dump them, finished, right? They'll run back to their flying monkeys, and they get almost all their supply off being a victim to their flying monkeys. That's what they do.
Absolutely. Absolutely, that happens. And let me say this, cluster B disorders, you've got your cluster A, B, and C. C being like dependent personality disorder and stuff like that. But cluster B is borderline, histrionic, narcissist, sociopaths, and psychopaths, those 5. Right. And Sam Vaknin calls the borderline a failed narcissist.
that could be, but what the borderline's trying to do is, so they are actually a narcissist, but for one person. That's the way
they seek.
They're focused on that one person. So they really are narcissists, but only with that one person.
Correct. And they're all, and all of them, what they all have in common is they're seeking validation outside of themselves.
Yes, they
don't know how to self-validate. They don't know how to be whole or complete by themselves.
Right.
And so
well, and the borderline is after perfect love, right? That's what the borderline. So, gee, how well does the narcissist and the borderline just click for a while, right?
Absolutely.
Till they don't.
Narcissist codependents, narcissist empaths, narcissist borderline. There's a lot of material out there about that combination. That's like the relationship from hell for sure. And
yeah,
yeah,
I agree. We can get a little too, sometimes people out there, they can get a little too into labeling everything. I mean, it was a hesitancy of
absolutely.
mine.
I think
That
all that we really need to know, instead of trying to figure out, am I borderline? Am I codependent?
Yeah.
Am I an inverted narcissist? Because that's a thing. I decided that's probably what I was. I self-diagnosed myself as an inverted narcissist at one point during recovery, because they're the ones who cannot ever be happy unless they're in a relationship with a narcissist.
Oh my God.
It has to
well,
be.
no, and that could be because they say that some people are narcissist magnets. And I would say that I might be that as well.
Yep.
It's like once you've had that, I don't know, like once you've had fake sugar, you don't want real sugar anymore. I don't know.
It's like
I don't know
everybody else is black and white, and they're so bland and boring and so healthy and
there is a kind of danger with them, and it's like in a world of possibility, right? When you meet this person, what they do is they give you this feeling that everything is endlessly possible. You could be rock stars tomorrow, or you could like be invited to orgies with really attractive people or something. Like
it's like heroin. It is exactly like a drug. We could do a whole talk on how it is like relationships are like being addicted to heroin. We have to detox. We have to get that drug out, because as long as we're craving that drug, we're craving that intensity, that technicolor, that
and nothing's ever the same, right?
Nothing else is ever going to compare. And I'm sure that that's how drug addicts feel. Like you want to give me an Advil and tell me to just, I need the heroin, because that's the only thing that's going to make me feel alive. It's going to make me feel okay. And without that, I'm not. So
exactly. No, it's really bad. And it's like, I wrote a little thing once about, the idea of that fantasy, that eternal, and, I had so much response from people, mostly women, but it was this idea that, I really kind of described it as, hey, we kind of want to be back there in that perfect 78 degrees and everything, blue skies forever. And everybody kind of responded to that with like, yeah, I mean, I hate him, but and the thing is, we're kind of pissed that they kicked us out of their fantasy bubble. Yes, they're awful people, but we didn't know it, and ignorance is bliss, So I'd just like to go over in the last couple minutes, probably we have. I'm not sure where we're at on time, but I do have some 8Rs. So we did 5.
Can we just list them today, because we've only got about 4 minutes, and I would like to come back at some point with you and spend a whole nother episode on those 8 things. But give us a little preview. Give us
okay. Well, these are just my 8Rs on how to overcome narcissistic abuse. And so the first one is remember and relive, reflect, renounce, release, restore, and rebuild. And so those are just the steps that you go through to kind of get from, where they left you at the bottom of wherever, to get up to the surface. And it's a really difficult process. I don't think anyone understands that, really the first, people say there's like all the 5 steps of narcissistic abuse. Well, the first step after narcissistic abuse is, I'm allergic to showers, a stage, and I can't get out of bed stage. And then there's the,
complete collapse.
I think I'm going crazy for reals this time stage. I mean, it's really hard. You feel like your whole reality's been upturned. I mean, I don't know how many of you have ever been on an acid trip. I took it a couple times in college, and let me tell you, it was nothing compared to the trip that narcissism has been.
Yes, I might have done that in high school a couple of times.
Oh my God,
I don't know.
It's like an acid trip with no acid.
It is. And how does anything compare to that?
I don't know.
How does anything compare to that? So I called myself a love junkie once, I think in one of my articles, because as far as naming like a label for myself. You know, I think it works because the addiction thing, we should do a talk on that, Myla, on addiction, how we become physically,
We
chemically,
do.
on a cellular
Yes,
level,
we definitely
really
do.
addicted to them.
I
This
mean, when I'm around him at all,
is not-
I can almost feel myself jonesing. They say, as they call it, for a hit of what he has. Like,
a
just
hit
give
of
me the
dopamine.
validation. Tell me I'm okay. Be, you know,
Yes,
make
like
me okay.
let's have the heroin in the eyeballs right now.
Yeah, right.
Give it to me. Give it
I
to me.
can't get within any. I can't get anywhere near him, or I'm like, I'm just like a
The
junkie. I'm just craving it. You
last
know.
time that I saw my ex-husband, uh, I thought I was at a better place. I had gone through all that crazy first year of just wanting
Oh
to
yeah.
die and falling apart and crumbling and all of that. And I felt like I was unsteady, but I was standing. So I
Yeah.
thought, okay, I'm going to see him, give him some, like his guitar back and whatever. We
Yeah.
went to,
Look how naive you are.
we went to an acai bowl place, and I was sitting at an outdoor table. And when I looked up, I didn't recognize him at first. I looked away, and then I was like, wait a second, is that him? And I looked again, and I tell you, it was like thunderbolts struck me and nearly knocked me out of my seat. I was overwhelmed with a gushing sensation of being flooded
Yes.
with like heroin. I
Yes.
was suddenly
The endorphins.
just
Yeah.
euphoric. This is a
Yep.
person who ruined my life,
Yes, and you have this
ruined
thing.
my relationship with
Yep.
my children, ruined my career. I was up for tenure at the college, didn't get that, you know, ruined so many things. And I was not just a victim, I volunteered, like, yes, ruin
Yeah.
it all. I want you
Yes.
to ruin it all some more, ruin it
But just
more.
love me. Just love me. Ruin it
Love me.
all, but just love
Just
me.
give
And that
me
is
more,
the
give
way
me
it
more.
feels.
Yeah.
The drug
And
analogy is very good, actually, because it
I
does
was
feel
just,
that way.
it was incredible. I was like a giddy middle school girl. When he
Yeah.
walked up,
Oh
like,
yeah. I mean, I've always said, you know, with my ex, like,
oh my gosh.
nobody could ever tell me anything about him. Nobody could ever tell me that anything was wrong. Like, I wouldn't hear it at all. And I always knew that. And yet I thought that was okay. It was just fine, you know, because that was what love was. I thought, and here's the thing that I really understand. What I thought was love apparently isn't. I mean, love is a lot more layered, I think, than that, and probably harder than he made it for me, because he was playing a role. And at the end of the day, you know, do you want, you know, the drug that you want, or do you want reality? Well, truth is, we want the drug that we want, but but when that goes away, we have to accept reality, and we have to live there somewhere. And
Yeah, and reality sucks right now, by the way. So wouldn't it be easier to have some medication for that? And the narcissist is that medication for.
Yes, they really are. I mean, they make themselves into whatever personal drug you need. They do. They kind of like chemically alter. They just sort of alter all the molecules around you to be what you need. And when they want to have you, they'll keep that persona on perfectly. And then once they're really done or bored or whatever, that mask drops, and then they don't care. And then the devaluation starts, and then the discard will come shortly thereafter.
It is some insane stuff, isn't it?
It is. I'll tell you.
Well, listen,
that's why we all have to bond together. Like,
we're gonna have to wrap it up, but will you tell us now? I'm gonna put some things, hopefully in the description, some links where you can connect with Myla if you want to read some of her things. And you have this, what we talked about today in some kind of article blog you've written.
Yeah, I will put it up on my site.
Get that to
just
me.
Go to Quora and search for Myla Morningstar and find it.
So tell us real quickly before we go, how can they connect with you? Your like the Gmail, and also tell us about the website you're working on.
Right. So yeah, so on Quora, just search for Myla Morningstar. That's what I go off of on Quora. And any one of my sites will come up hidden, or any of them, or my profile will have everything. So also you can reach me. So I do life coaching. I do like to call myself a narcissism survival expert, because that's what I've been. I don't say I'm more or less. I survived it. And I successfully divorced a narcissist, and I can hopefully, anyone who's out there is overwhelmed and feels like they're losing the battle against cluster B or against narcissism. There is clarity out there from the people, especially who've survived it and gone through it and come out at the other end. It's either going to kill you or you're going to learn some things about it. So I do that. If you'd like to reach me, my email is roadsidenamaste, like the peace, like namaste, roadsidenamaste@gmail.com. And then my upcoming website that I'm currently working on is also going to be called roadsidenamaste.com. And but if anyone's interested in booking a session on the life coaching, I am just reach out to me by email for now, roadsidenamaste@gmail.
Roadside Namaste.
Namaste.
Okay,
but we'll have that up on the site.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. That is the greatest gift we can give to one another. And I know we have common goals is to educate the world about the realities of what this is, both when we're in it and when we come out of it, in hopes that we don't get into it again. And so I think we're doing the work, boots on the ground. And I just really appreciate you and what you're doing. And
thank you. I appreciate what you're doing. I mean, I write and I can only reach so many people, but this venue is amazing. And thank you for being such an awesome interviewer. I appreciate it. This is my first podcast. So.
Well, thank you again. And to all my listeners, tune in again. Maybe we'll bring Myla back and talk a little bit more about some of these things that only survivors would know.
secret survival secrets.
Secret survival things. That's right. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.